take, shall we? There's one. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, good one too. Woo-wee! Oh my gosh, hear the drag. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Way of the Hook. This is going to be the first in a video series going over my approach to winter stripers. I use it a lot here in the Middle Tennessee area where I live, but it'll apply pretty much anywhere in the country. First video is going to be rod and reel selection. What I like to do is break this into 4 different categories just to help streamline the process of choosing the rod and reels you take with you. I fish out of a kayak where I'm limited on space, so I do have to be pretty mindful of how much I'm taking because I know I'm not going to be able to carry everything I'd like to. And as you see in these video clips, there's several different approaches I use, and a lot of it does involve spinning gear. There is a reason for that. I'll be going over all this in this video, kind of explaining why I've chosen what I've chosen and the reason I use it and how I break it into categories. Now the first category I'm going to go over is the lightest of the 4. For this, I like to use spinning gear in 7 to 7'6" length with a medium to medium heavy power rating and a fast action. Now for the rod, the reason those factors are important, the length gives me optimal casting distance. It just helps cover water in the winter, and certain places I fish, the further you can cast, the more to your advantage it is. Also, the medium to medium heavy power is, although I'm not usually targeting larger fish with this, I'd like to have a little bit in reserve to deal with a bigger fish that surprises me. The fast action helps a lot with casting and sensitivity. Some of these lures work well with a really crisp rod, and any kind of sluggish play in the rod hinders the lure action. Now the approaches you're going to be taking with this as far as lures and everything would be your smaller lures, more of a subtle retrieve where the fast action comes in nice because it gives you really infinite control over what your lure is doing in the water. You are typically going to be targeting smaller fish with this. So anything around the 30-inch mark and under is going to be the target size or ideal for what this rod can handle. However, I like that medium heavy on this because there's times when you're going to have larger fish show up, and it's nice to have the medium heavy to help you with that, such as this fish here, which was caught on a 7-foot medium heavy rod and 10-pound braid. Here's a good example video of what I'm talking about, using a smaller lure, decent sized fish, about 28-30 inches, and throwing a small topwater. I'll let you watch.
That's a striper. A nice striper. That's the right flavor.
Alright, next category is going to be a heavier set of spinning gear, typically 6'6" to 8 foot, medium heavy to heavy. I like a moderate to a fast action rod on this. The fast action is still nice for the casting distance and control, however, a little bit of tip on this helps a lot with shock absorption when you're dealing with larger fish. Most of my rods in this category tend to be inshore rods, which have a little bit more backbone, a little bit more tip. Again, that helps a lot. The reels you're going to be pairing this with are 40 or 4,000 size reels. They have higher line capacity, significantly higher drag strength, and you're going to get a lot more line recovery, which helps when you're making really long casts and need to either bring a fish or lure back in quickly. This is kind of my workhorse utility category, I guess you could say. It's the one I use the most and depend on the most. And I stray out of this when I have specialized cases, but it is a very good starting point. Now, the things I use this for the most are going to be heavier lures, wind-resistant lures, aggressive retrieves. If I need a faster line recovery, greater line capacity, you see here, higher hook set power, especially over long distances. Even with braid, that strength in the backbone of the rod helps to bury a hook in a fish's mouth. And when I'm dealing with larger fish, this also gives a great advantage to casting distance, particularly the longer lengths. The reason for that is the longer the rod, the faster tip speed you can generate, especially when using a power cast or a snap cast. And couple that with the braided line that I prefer to use, and it helps me to reach fish that are breaking a long distance out, which is really advantageous from a kayak because you can't always paddle over to the fish and need to get on them as quickly as possible before they go back down. Also helps to reach fish that may not be reachable by other means, and I do have other approaches for that, but this category happens to fit all of that criteria in a pretty good way to where I tend to use it more than any other. Now in the upcoming video you're going to see me using one of these rods. It is a 7.5 foot medium heavy inshore rod rated for, I believe, 1/2 to 1.5 ounce lures and 10 to 20 pound line. Notice that I'm able to do a lot of manipulation with the rod and still keep tension on the fish, and a lot of that has to do with the tip action being a little bit softer than a true fast, and also because of the butt strength of the rod. Alright, The next section is casting gear, and typically I'm using this in the 8 foot. Preferred 7.5 is fine. I like heavy power and up. Want a moderate to fast action. The reels that go with this are either low profile or round. I prefer low profile. I do want a wide spool for higher line capacity, and my gear ratio on this is 6.3 to 1 or less. The reason for that is I'm typically using swim baits on this in heavier gear, and I don't need to move that bait really fast. In fact, the slower retrieve can sometimes help give the lure a little more natural action to it as opposed to a fast burn. Also helps casting lures that aren't inherently great at casting with spinning gears, such as the 7-inch redfin like I'm throwing here. You can notice I'm giving a lot of power to this on that snap cast, which helps get that lure out there, and it sails truer. Again, this is going to be used for large, heavy lures. It does give you better accuracy, especially with these larger lures, which tend to be more wind resistant or impossible to cast on spinning gear. With the reels, you're going to get stronger drag strengths. It's going to be ideal for slower retrieves, and it's also going to be ideal for live bait, which is a very popular option for striped bass at all times of year. The final category is kind of a special category. This I'm using surf spinning. Anywhere from 9 to 10 foot rod is recommended. Just anything outside of that makes it hard to actually use lures or manipulate them in any way. I prefer medium heavy and up. The rod I want moderate to fast action again. The reels are 5500 and up depending on the size of the rod. 6500 would be about right, and if you feel comfortable going up to an 8000, that's possible. I prefer 5500 myself. Now the benefits of this are a maximum casting distance with heavy lures, and you're going to be able to use some really aggressive retrieves. The pencil popper that I'm using in this particular video is a good example. It does require a pretty aggressive retrieve in order to work the way it's supposed to, and the surf rod gives me the ability to do that and also to cast that lure a tremendous distance, far further than I could with any of my other gear. This gear, however, does come with one disadvantage, and that's in regards to fighting a fish. The reason for this is the rod itself is so long, so much of it extends out beyond the handle, and that gives a fish a tremendous amount of leverage. Now, while you can steer fish really well, once they get close, there's going to be a lot of issues with control just due to the fact that the angle that you're going to have to hold your line and rod at to get the fish close is going to put all the advantage in the fish's favor. But this disadvantage alone isn't enough for me to leave these rods at home due to the fact that with them I'm able to reach out over such a long distance and use lures that I otherwise wouldn't with different gear. So that concludes my video. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. If you would give me a like, share, and subscribe. The next video in this series I'll be going over the line, knots, and terminal tackle I use for striper fishing. And to keep up with what I'm doing and where I'm at on the water, check me out at Way of the Hook at Instagram and Facebook.